I found a plane ticket in my husband's coat pocket and spent 3 days convinced he was cheating on me and I was wrong about everything. Let me tell you what actually happened, because it is not the story you think it is. Marco and I had been married for 9 years when I found that ticket. We had a good marriage, not a perfect one, but the kind that feels solid and real and worth protecting. He was a quiet man, steady, the kind of husband who came home every evening and meant it when he asked how your day was. I had never had a reason to doubt him. Not once in 9 years. That Thursday morning, I was grabbing his coat from the hook by the door because it was raining and I needed something to throw on quickly, and my fingers found an envelope in the pocket and I pulled it out and opened it without thinking, because we were that kind of couple. No secrets. No closed doors. Or so I believed. One plane ticket. Single. Lisbon. Departing that Saturday morning. I stood in the hallway and I read it 3 times. Marco had not mentioned Lisbon. He had not mentioned any trip. He had not mentioned anything at all, and we had sat at dinner the night before and talked about the weekend, and he had said nothing. Not a word. I put the ticket back. I went to work. And I spent the entire day sitting at my desk trying to find an explanation that made sense and not finding one that I liked. That evening I watched him carefully. The way he checked his phone at dinner and smiled at something on the screen before he put it away. The way he seemed lighter than usual, almost relieved about something. The way he kissed me goodnight and held on for just a second longer than normal. I told myself I was imagining things. But that night when he fell asleep, I lay there in the dark and I thought about that ticket, and I thought about the smile at the phone, and I thought about all the evenings recently when he had seemed distracted and far away, and I felt something cold settle into my chest that I could not reason my way out of. I did not go through his phone. I want to be clear about that because it matters for how the story ends. I did not search through his messages or his emails or anything else. I made a decision that if something was happening, I was going to hear it from him directly, and I was going to give him the chance to tell me the truth on his own. So Friday evening after dinner, I sat across from Marco at the kitchen table, and I put that plane ticket down between us, and I looked at him, and I said, I found this. And I need you to tell me what is going on. He looked at the ticket, and then he looked at me, and something moved across his face that I was not expecting. Not guilt. Not the expression of a man who had been caught doing something he shouldn't. Something much rawer than that. Something that looked like it had been waiting behind his eyes for a very long time. He said, sit down. I need to tell you something I should have told you years ago. And I sat down and he started talking, and within 2 minutes I understood that I had been completely wrong about everything. Before Marco and I met, he had a daughter. Her name was Elena, and she was born when Marco was 24 years old from a relationship that ended badly and quickly and left him standing outside a hospital with a baby he was not prepared for and a woman who had already decided she wanted nothing more to do with him. Her name was Christina, and she was not a cruel person, but she was a frightened one, and when Elena was 8 months old, Christina told Marco that she was moving back to her family in Portugal, and that she wanted a clean start, and that she felt it would be better for everyone if Marco was not part of that picture. Marco fought it. He hired a lawyer, and he went to court, and he spent every cent he had at 24 years old trying to keep his daughter in his life, and he lost because Christina had family money and a good legal team, and Marco had neither, and the court allowed her to relocate. He saw Elena twice after that. Both times supervised. Both times brief. And then Christina stopped responding to his lawyers and changed her number and moved without leaving a forwarding address, and Marco spent the next 3 years trying to find them through every legal channel available to him and hitting wall after wall after wall. Elena was 3 years old the last time Marco held her. He told me all of this sitting at our kitchen table on a Friday evening, and I sat across from him, and I did not say a single word because I could see what it cost him to say it out loud, and I did not want to interrupt that. He told me that when we met, he had been trying to find Elena for 4 years already, and he was exhausted and heartbroken in a way that had become so familiar, he had almost stopped recognizing it as grief. He said he had not told me because he did not know how, and because every time he tried to find the words, he could not get past the fear that it would change how I saw him, or that I would not understand, or that saying it out loud would make the loss feel fresh again in a way he could not handle. So he had carried it. Through our entire relationship and our wedding and 9 years of marriage, he had carried this missing daughter like a stone in his chest, and he had not told me, and I had not known, and we had built our whole life together on top of that silence. I sat there and I thought about 9 years. 9 years of living with a man and loving him and not knowing that somewhere inside him there was this enormous missing piece that he had never let me see or touch or help him carry. And then Marco told me what had happened 3 weeks ago. He had been contacted by a social worker in Lisbon. Elena was 18 now. She had grown up and she had started asking questions, and Christina, perhaps finally feeling the weight of what she had done or perhaps simply unable to keep lying to an adult daughter who deserved the truth, had given Elena her father's name. Elena had hired someone to help her find him, and 3 weeks ago Marco had received an email from a social worker explaining that his daughter wanted to make contact. Marco had read that email and sat in his car in the office parking lot for 45 minutes before he could drive home. He had been in contact with Elena for 3 weeks. Carefully, slowly, one message at a time, feeling his way toward a daughter he had last held when she was 3 years old and who was now a grown woman who had spent her entire childhood wondering why her father had never come for her. He had booked the ticket to Lisbon because Elena had asked if they could meet in person. She had said she needed to see his face when he answered her questions. She had said she had a lot of questions. Marco looked at me across our kitchen table, and his voice was very steady, but his hands were not, and he said, "I should have told you all of this a long time ago, and I am sorry that I didn't. I was ashamed of losing her, and I was afraid, and I kept thinking I would find her first, and then tell you, and then the years kept passing, and I never found her, and I didn't know how to explain why I had waited so long." I sat there for a long time after he stopped talking. I thought about a little girl who grew up without her father, not because he didn't want her but because he lost her and couldn't find his way back. I thought about Elena at 18 writing to a stranger who was her father and asking to meet him, and what kind of courage that must have taken. I thought about Marco sitting in that parking lot for 45 minutes reading an email that changed everything. And I thought about the ticket. Single. Just him. Because he had not asked me to come, because he had not yet told me any of it, and he was still trying to figure out how to carry it all alone the way he had always done. I reached across the table and I put my hand over his. He looked up at me, and I could see he was trying to read my face and not quite managing it, and I said, "Marco, I need you to listen to me carefully." He nodded. I said, "You are not going to Lisbon alone." He looked at me and didn't speak. I said, "She has been waiting 18 years to meet her father, and I am not going to let you walk into that room by yourself, because you have been carrying this alone long enough, and that stops now." I said, "Book me a ticket. We are going together." His face did something I had never seen it do before in 9 years of marriage. It just completely gave way. Every bit of composure he had held together through that whole conversation just came apart quietly, and he put his head down, and I felt his shoulders shaking under my hand, and I sat there, and I held on, and I let him. After a while he looked up and his eyes were red, and he said, "Why are you not angry with me?" And I said, "I am a little angry with you. I am going to be angry with you about this for quite some time. But right now there is a girl in Lisbon who has her father's eyes and has been waiting 18 years for him to show up, and being angry can wait." He looked at me for a long moment, and then he said, "I don't know what I did to deserve you." I squeezed his hand and I said, "You can make it up to me later. Right now go and book my ticket." And he did.